Hello, I'm very excited to welcome everyone to the final event in this year's 2022 Diverse Perspectives in Digital Media and Design speaker series. To paraphrase James Baldwin, nothing can be changed until it is faced. And this is certainly true of the inequities that have historically shaped the film industry, both on screen and behind the scenes. We would like to begin today's event by acknowledging that the land on which we gather here in Storrs, Connecticut, is the territory of Mohegan, Mantutucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pagooset, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting the land, and we aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their examples. Today's event will feature a candid conversation with our special guest, Wee Gu, followed by a Q&A with our co-hosts and questions from the virtual audience. So please take advantage of the YouTube chat box to submit any questions for which we will try to answer during the discussion. I'm Heather Elliott Familaro, and I'm the department head for digital media and design at the University of Connecticut. Digital media and design is a young department which has rapidly grown to over 350 undergraduate and graduate students and 26 full-time faculty. We have 7 undergraduate concentrations across the full digital media spectrum, from film production to animation, interactivity, digital business, and the humanities, both at the Storrs and the Stanford campuses. In our department, we value and celebrate our students' diverse backgrounds, and we support their development both as individuals and as professional media creators. So this Diverse Perspectives in Digital Media and Design speaker series is one celebration of those shared values. So now on to the show. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome today's co-hosts. We've got Assistant Professor Oscar Guerra. Oscar Guerra is an Emmy Award-winning director, researcher, and educator. He is an assistant professor of film and video at the University of Connecticut and is a producer for PBS Frontline. Dr. Guerra's focus is storytelling that promotes critical thinking and social investment. He aims to produce media that provides a way for underrepresented groups to share and disseminate their counter stories, contradict dominant and potentially stereotypical narratives, and strengthen their voices and identities. Dr. Guerra's career spans the spectrum of television environments, music, multimedia production, documentaries for social change, promotional video, immersive video, and has a vast international experience as well. So welcome, Dr. Guerra.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for being here.
And I'm also very happy to introduce our student co-hosts today. We've got 2 wonderful students with us. Manuel Alvarez is a sophomore majoring in digital media and design who considers himself to be a professional learner and achiever. Welcome, Manuel.
Hi, thank you so much for introducing me. It's nice to be here, and I can't wait for this.
Excellent. And then we also have Kevin Brown, who's a senior majoring in digital media and design with a minor in studio art. And his work varies across branding, industrial design, and web and user experience design. So welcome, Kevin.
Happy to be here. Super excited for the talk.
And let me go ahead and turn over the virtual mic to you, Oscar, so you can introduce our special guest.
Of course, Heather, thank you so much. I feel like I have to introduce, that was Heather Elliott Familaro, our wonderful chair in the Digital Media and Design Department. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And it's really wonderful to be welcoming our super guest today, Wee Gu, who is going to talk with us today about coded hierarchy, cinematic language in documentary film. So if you allow me, I'm going to read the following introduction that we have for Wee. Wee Gu is a multinational filmmaker, and her visual artist, whose award-winning films explore the clash between individuals and systems of power. Her work has been supported by the Sundance Institute, Firelight Media, and Film Independent, and she was awarded Best Emerging Filmmaker at the 2019 Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. Yu is a proud member of Brown Girls Doc Mafia, Film Fatalis, and the Asian American Documentary Network. Wee's latest feature documentary, A Woman's Work, The NFL's Cheerleader Problem, world premiere at the 2019 Tribeca Film Festival and qualified for the Academy Awards. Variety hailed the film as defiant, a tale of injustice that should speak to many. You also co-directed the feature documentary Who is Arthur Chu on the controversial Jeopardy champion, praised as raw, unfiltered, and poignant by IndieWire. The documentary won 2 festival grand jury awards and was released internationally in 2018. Her latest work includes Super Reviewers, a short documentary for CNN Films, and an episode for the Apple TV documentary series Gutsy. You, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar, for that introduction. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you, Heather and Kevin and Manuel, for everybody being here and the students in the classroom. Yeah, I guess I just start with sort of how I came into this work, because I want to talk about storytelling in documentary form, but I think my personal experience and the steps I took to get to where I am now is indicative of this kind of these different storytelling forms and different perspectives. So I was born and raised in China. My father is a visual artist. So I grew up in the late 1980s in China when it was just opening up to the West. And I actually grew up in an art school where everyone lived together and everyone has studios and sort of created together. And so I was sort of taught this idea that, an artist has a practice, right? That it's not, that's something that you continually work on, and your practice changes and evolves to include different types of visual and artistic language. When after my father and my family, we immigrated to Canada, it was the immigrant experience really informed my father's work. And that's something that I was really impressed upon me as a child, that his art was about connecting with people, telling his story, his personal story, and not just in a way of trying to assimilate into this new society, but really to create space for himself, for who he is, and for our community. So I think that's something that definitely inspired me as a kid. And, when I first tried my hand at filmmaking, at documentary filmmaking, it was with a similar kind of spirit, because I do also think, because of my family's history and the generations of my family that endured a lot of political upheaval, revolution, war, immigration, I think there is this passed down, one could say generational trauma, which definitely there is a lot, but it's also this responsibility, right, as a storyteller, to not only sort of tell the truth of our stories, but to explore what that really means, and where there is a lack of knowledge that, for example, I don't understand exactly what my grandparents went through or my parents went through, but it is through my exploration of that creates this kind of sort of new artistic life that comes out of their past stories. And so my first film was actually a hybrid film. This was my thesis film at USC Film School. It's a personal documentary. But it started out as a narrative film, as a fictionalized version of sort of my childhood growing up in China, which turned into a documentary. So if you could play the clip of A Moth in Spring.
vague memories of my past life and the present city, I searched for another way forward. For the first time, I saw the distance between my family and me after 20 years apart.
走吗？啊？你走吗？还是你站起？走好，走好。再喊一遍，再喊一遍。月儿。你喊我名字。月儿。你这个小子。慢一点。啊？慢一点。你晓不晓得吃苦是啥子？月儿，月儿，你晓不晓得风格是啥子？你晓不晓得右派是啥子？嗯？你晓不晓得核武类是啥子？你晓不晓得你为啥子姓顾不姓杨？你晓不晓得一家人长期分离是啥子味道？月儿，你晓不晓得
Okay, so yeah, that was again a personal documentary, and I think the main thing that I focused on in that little scene or kind of sequence was the fact that I didn't have any of the answers that my grandparents asked me. So, you know, they're asking me all of these questions, but at the same time, you know, it's not like I'm trying to say, you know, this is my understanding of what happened to you. You know, it's the understanding is pretty much impossible because we live and grew up in totally different places, totally different cultures. But the act of listening and the act of asking those questions, that was the thing that I thought was important and wanted to focus on. Yeah, so I don't know if Oscar, you had any questions or wanted to jump in here.
You know what? I think that it's so interesting, and this is something that Kevin, I'm sure that Kevin is going to bring it up in a second. So I'm going to be brief with my question, then I'm going to have a follow-up. The matter of representation with your own family, it's not easy, you know, and I think that Kevin is going to ask you about this too, is who are we to represent as filmmakers? I'm a documentarian as well as you. I also try to deal with this question. So the question that I have for you is like, it's a big responsibility, right? To represent who we are, but at the same time, how do you manage that balance between saying this is my story, but I'm also representing something bigger than myself?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think that's something that, again, it's something that I don't have a final answer to. I think it's something that continually that I think about and I negotiate through my work. You know, as I mentioned, like in this scene, it's only questions. There's no answers. So I'm not pretending in a way that I know all of the answers and I can represent their experience and my experience in this cohesive way. There's actually, the form itself actually reflects the sort of chaos and fragmentation and lack of knowledge and, you know, distance between me and my family, between our language. Like I'm speaking English, they're speaking a dialect of Chinese. So I really try to think about those complications, I guess, and include that in the form of the film that I'm trying to make. But of course, living in a place like the United States of America or Canada, where someone like me as an Asian American, I'm seen as a minority, there is this immense pressure, to represent, right? And to fight for representation. But I think for me, representation is just a tool, right? It's not the end goal, because what are we trying, the more interesting thing is, what are our values? What are we trying to represent? And how can we make space for those things in this place, right? And the idea of not always needing to translate oneself into this other culture, but to show or express oneself and one's community in all of its sort of nuance and complication, even though other people may not, or the majority may not really understand, or is not something that is familiar to them. I think there's value in that.
And I think what you were doing with the documentary is just so like the questions without any answers, from your grandpa and your grandma. I think that is a very powerful way, and it's a very humbling moment to realize that we don't have the answers. The best we can do is to expose with those questions, right? So I think that you're doing a really good job about saying what you actually show with your film. What is one of those questions that resonates the most with you?
I think for me, the most, I guess, poignant question would be, do you know what it's like for a family to be split apart? And I think it's poignant because that happened in my grandparents' generation. My grandfather was basically taken away and imprisoned in a labor camp for 2 decades. My dad grew up without really knowing him. And then, for us, my dad, my parents and I, we all immigrated to Canada. So we have been separate from our family in China for so long. And it's just so much, there's so much trauma and sort of and love there that it's like really difficult to articulate through words, right? And through language. And I think that's something that's interesting for the visual medium, for the medium of visual art or documentary, that there's this possibility or potential to somehow express those things that are not language based.
And this is not a question, but just like a comment just about what we saw. It was very nostalgic, I felt a little blue, and especially when they were asking all the questions, when he says, why this is your last name and not this other one. I'm like, I've never thought about that, like why my last name is Guerra and not Perez.
Yeah.
It made it so personal, like you're going from something very abstract to something that is very relatable for you as a viewer. So I appreciate you so much, because I think that I'm not going to say the problem of representation, the journey of representation as filmmakers. I think that it's a very personal journey, and like the way in which we explore it, it's very unique. And I just wanted to point out that I love that part.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think also when you're trying to represent, you also have to interface with sort of the external structures, external systems with which your work is seen or shared with the world. And I think that presents a whole other host of challenges. So I'm just going to move on into sort of the next phase of my work, so I began with, my first film, which is pretty personal look at my family and my own story. But then from there, I shifted into telling the story of others. And I think that's to me a very huge shift, because it's a different type of responsibility that as a documentary filmmaker that you are then taking on. And I think I was really interested, as someone who has not really felt like I belong to any one nationality or place, culture necessarily. I was really fascinated by these characters, these people that seemingly also were from the margins, but wanted to take on something that was so mainstream, that was so dominant and powerful. And then the next two feature films that I made, one is called Who is Arthur Chu, which is about this controversial Asian American Jeopardy champion who kind of upended the whole culture and the way that Jeopardy, the culture of Jeopardy is enjoyed in this country. And the other one is called A Woman's Work, which follows two NFL cheerleaders who sued their team and the NFL because they're paid less than minimum wage. I think with both of those films, it really tickles me, I guess, and it really piqued my interest and fascination because I wanted to look into something that is a huge institution such as Jeopardy, which for decades has represented the bar of knowledge of what is intelligence, in American culture, and also the NFL National Football League, and football as a religion really in this country, and how does gender and race play into those two huge sort of cultural institutions. So I think in the making of those two films, I really came up against and sort of interfaced with these sort of hierarchies in cinematic language when it comes to documentary. Because for me, I came from, as I mentioned, a background of visual art. A lot of documentary filmmakers come from the background of journalism, which I really didn't know that much about. It was more for me, following my curiosity and creativity in telling these stories. So that was an opportunity, though, for me to explore certain tropes. For example, the tradition of journalism and the interview, the idea of cinema verite and objectivity of being a fly on the wall, and then questioning and playing with certain tropes of the hero's journey, who is the protagonist, the antagonist, and the idea that you have to have a purity of form. If your film is a cinema verite film, you cannot be seen, in that film. You basically are a ghost, and it's like this voyeurism of letting the audience just watch these people, play out their lives, and having things unfold. So that was really fun for me to kind of subvert some of these ideas and these tropes. So I think we can play the clip of Who is Arthur Chu first.
A Jeopardy means one of those moments when you've bet all your money, everything is on the line.
Arthur. Was Philbin. Regis Philbin, yes. Arthur.
What is Louisiana?
That's the state. Arthur.
What is Dell?
Dell is the company. Arthur.
What are pixels?
Right. And you have a big lead.
This 30-year-old from Ohio is single-handedly turning America's favorite quiz show into a mind game.
It took a little while for Arthur to get the audiences to warm up to him.
This Asian on Jeopardy is one of the worst human beings on the planet. The Asian guy on Jeopardy is such a cocky bastard. I hope your wife dies.
My dad always taught me, with good reason, that there's value in a simple life, a life without jeopardy, as little as possible. A steady job, keeping your head down, avoiding controversy, avoiding conflict. I had all that. And now I started saying yes to those jeopardies instead of saying no. You know, I have the right to be heard. I have the right to be different. I have the right to break rules. To me, that's something Asian Americans haven't done enough of, that we don't have enough political activism, we don't have enough people speaking out and being different, we don't have enough people making
Do
the
it because
culture.
you feel like you have to do it easy and like it's very because I get it.
But it is, in the end, it's who I am.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions. I mean, before, because I just want to be asking the questions, but we also have here Kevin and Manuel, and they're like, hey,
Yeah.
let me ask a few things here. So I don't know. Let's start with Kevin, and then we'll go with Manuel. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for that transition. And I think just from the 2 clips alone we've seen from your work, it kind of shows how you represent more of your emotions and just the relationship of these cultural values you have with your work, instead of just putting it out there in the most, I guess, non-abstract way. It's kind of less theory-based, if that makes sense. And I was wondering if you could comment on that. Was that intentional? Or is that something that just happened as you were in the process of making?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very interested in not just what story to tell, but also how to tell it and why am I telling those stories. So in that process of reflecting and thinking about those questions, you know, me and my collaborators, we try to figure out a way to tell the story, to film the story, to edit the story, to write the story, to put everything together in a way that honors those questions and you know what we're trying to express. And you know, because this film and my next film were independent films, meaning independently financed through grants and so on, we didn't have to adhere to sort of like commercial or other people's kind of perspectives. It was something that we could figure out together ourselves. And I think that kind of, you know, that kind of artistic independence is really important, and it does allow filmmakers and artists to be, again, to honor the process and the questions and everything, the journey that it took to make this work, right? Versus, you know, more commercially based films or agenda driven films. It's more about being seamless and not showing the sort of behind the scenes in a way, not showing the perspective, not showing you know, the seams. It's like just trying to be like this glossy kind of product, I guess, that's consumable.
Yeah, thank you. That definitely answered the question. I think Manuel had something as well to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're making these films, do you align yourself more as an observer, or are you more like partaking towards like how you can curate their vision?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, that's a really interesting question. I think it's definitely both. I think something that I like, you know, there's that traditional in cinema verite, the idea that you should be a fly on the wall. But of course, we're not flies. We are humans carrying, you know, a giant piece of equipment, that the camera, which has a lot of power. And so I like this one longtime cinematographer, Joan Churchill. She said, you know, my role is to really be a friend in the room. And I think that is something that I try to think about when I am in the field, you know, filming with my characters, you know, documenting what is unfolding in front of me. But I think it's definitely, you know, like this film, Who is Arthur Chu? It took about a year to film just for the filming process. And then it took about another year in the editing or writing of this film. So, you know, in that time, you become a partner on their journey. Like, you cannot deny your effect, you know, on on your characters. So yeah, it really becomes more of a collaboration. It becomes more of a back and forth, a conversation about, what we're doing, what part of your life or your story we're interested in and why. It becomes much more of a back and forth.
Thank you so much.
We have a couple more clips. So just for the sake of time, would it be okay if we go to a woman's work?
Yes.
Awesome.
When people ask me if I'm a Jill, I take it as a compliment, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, I'm really not. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how to take it because that's also the ones that got the lawsuit going, so.
No, nobody cares about the Jills. No, honestly, no, I'm not. Like, all they do is like tramp themselves out for guys, drunk guys.
Which is you every time you go to a Bills game.
No, it's not, dude.
I guess in the grand scheme of things, you're gonna get paid what you're worth.
They make
pay
millions.
$10 an hour for you to shovel out the stadium.
Yeah.
They could at least get that.
Yeah.
I mean,
younger girls are growing up trying to accept themselves for who they are, and they can't because they see all these women that are tiny little stick figures, and I don't agree with the image that a lot of these NFL cheerleaders are portraying.
hi Maria. Can you say hi to mommy? Good girl.
When I first saw the Jills, I don't know what they were doing, I don't know what they were trying to sell or anything, but there were two girls there, and I remember going up to them and getting my picture taken.
Ooh.
They were so beautiful, and they were all sparkly in their uniforms. They just give off this good feeling vibe, and you want that.
Maria, what do you got in your bathing suit? Water balloons? Oh my god. Oh! Get it, Maria!
There's a very specific look to being a Buffalo Jill that they liked. You can only wear red lipstick. You have to have fake eyelashes. It's a very bold look. I thought I looked really pretty, but it was a different look, a look that I wasn't used to, and I liked it. Why would a grown woman want to be a cheerleader anyway? Show off your body? Cater to men at other events? I don't feel sorry for them at all. I have no respect for these women. Wow. Okay. If a woman signed an agreement to let Playboy take nude pics of her, should she be able to later sue them for taking nude pics of her? She was probably getting paid. They have to be realist. They aren't needed, necessary, and neither is their talent anything of value. Oh my God. It makes me nauseous. I would never say that about somebody's job. I would never say that about anything that anyone has accomplished that felt like it was worth something to them.
Thanks for sharing that. Let me ask a quick question. When you're producing these films, when you're producing this type of documentaries, of course, you're going to have a reaction from the people, right? Because when we're talking about race, gender, equality, of course, you're going to get that divided reaction. When you're editing it, when you're writing it, in this case, what are you trying to change about that person? Like, who do you have in mind and say, you know what, I would like for you precisely to watch this piece and be able to reframe the way in which you think? Do you think that about that, or it's more like your own process? You even think about the audience and how they're going to perceive what you're writing and cutting?
I think for me, it's not necessarily that I have like it is a specific audience, but it's not just like one person, or I don't just create from that perspective. It's much more of a process of, for me, filtering. Like you see in the last clip, you see the reactions from the football fans at the tailgate of like what their views are, what their perceptions are of cheerleaders. You see the perception from these online comments of these cheerleaders. And then you also see using home video and this kind of recollection, these memories, like the woman herself, Maria, her own memories of what it means to her to be a cheerleader and owning her sexuality since even from when she was a little girl to later when she became a cheerleader. So I think what I love is just the interplay between all of those things, like including the perception, you know, the external perception, stereotyping, what have you, of these characters, but then also infusing their own interior life into the story. And I think that's what's interesting to me, and that kind of interplay is something that we all have to deal with as individuals who live in a society, right? So I think in many ways, especially for people coming from marginalized communities, our journey in whatever we do, no matter what we do, is that kind of interplay between who we are, who we have built ourselves to be, and how others perceive us, right? But there is a balance to be had, and there is sort of this negotiation that is a continuous thing.
Guys, Manuel, why don't you have a follow-up, and then Kevin, you'll do it after the next clip, just to keep an eye on time. Manuel.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're going after these sensitive topics, what people consider sensitive, what is the audience that you strive for? Or like after you find like that audience, how did you respond to the audience reactions? What's the next step after that?
So I think for me, in taking on sort of these large mainstream institutions like Jeopardy, like the NFL, the goal is to gain a wider audience, you know, to bring people into this dialogue who maybe love football or, you know, who are just fans of Jeopardy, whatever it is. And, you know, the way for me, for these independent films, for many independent filmmakers, film festivals are sort of the first opportunity for you to share your work with audiences. And so, you know, going to film festivals, we actually brought Maria and Lacey, the two main characters of A Woman's Work, to our premiere at Tribeca, New York. It's an amazing process, and you just learn so much. And the other way that we have you know, shared and interface with people is doing these kind of like these online screenings where we're showing the film to cheer squads at different colleges. We're showing the film to current and former NFL cheerleaders. And actually, so the film was on Independent Lens, which is a series on PBS in 2021. And around the same time, there were a group of cheerleaders in the NFL who were interested in forming a union and who were interested in further discussing these questions of labor and labor rights in their own community. So we held several screenings for them. And I think that has just been, you know, when that happens with a documentary, I think that's a very special experience. I'm not sure if that answered your questions.
No, it was perfect. It was perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, and it doesn't mean that we cannot go back and retake one of these questions, but if it's okay with everyone, let's move on and look at the next clip, interior migrations.
Oh yeah, let me just say a few words before we get into it, because this one is quite different. So as I mentioned in the beginning, you know, for me, filmmaking is a practice, and it's something that, although I think our industry forces, you know, such as commercial forces or just, you know, perception, it pretty much forces you in a way to be very specialized, right? It forces you to, it does sort of pigeonhole you into whatever, you know, form of film that you're trying to do. But for me, I view it really as a practice, and my goal, and it's not easy, you know, my goal is to have different facets of myself and my work, so that it's not just, you know, one type of film that I'm trying to make. The previous two films are feature-length documentaries, and then this clip that you're about to see called Interior Migrations, it's a single screen video adapted from a 3-screened visual installation, which showed at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. And it's something that I actually worked on with my dad, who is a visual artist. So I think it's important for me, myself personally, to really continue to think about form, right? And how I can experiment with this kind of language and not take it for granted. And I think in a bigger picture level, I think that will lead to this, just a sort of a different type of richness and diversity really in this industry, in this art form, because I think that the medium really is the message. If you're only stuck with one type of film, one type of way of telling a story, you're really going to be reinforcing the lines of power and hierarchy that already exist in our society and culture. So please show Interior Migrations.
Yes. In a bathroom.
So I think the screen is not the correct screen.
Bathroom. Yes. In a bathroom. Bathroom. I see. Yeah, master bedroom.
Master room?
Yeah, master bedroom. This is my room. This is the boss.
Yeah. One over there, so.
Oh, yeah, I put
one over there, so.
I
see one here.
Oh, so the flick on, they switch it to have them light up.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright, you see, I put the breaker. And the wire will come out, so I'm coming at this box.
Look like.
I'm coming at this.
So I'm not full of them, Are we not full of them?
Well, enough, we've been there, you know, so. Sometimes I get dreams, sometimes your dreams are in a different place. Yeah, them say one travel and one stay. Then they say they want to travel. If you don't come back, you don't wake.
Me 5 daughters and 4 sons, that's 9, eh? Alright, bro, man, me can't call your name. Dream of me when you are lonely. Dream of me when you are sad and blue. As my darling, I will be home to send you this word from my heart. As though you are miles from me, my darling. I will be home in your arm where I belong. You are the nicest love I ever have. Okay, close your eye. Give me your hand, darling. Do you feel my heart beating? Do you understand? Do you feel the same? No, I only dreaming. An eternal face to face. We was meant to be, darling. And I watch you when you're sleeping. Do you understand? Do you feel the same? No, I only dreaming. Okay. Yeah.
Pull it.
What a great character. Kevin, please go ahead.
Yeah, so after watching that clip, this question sort of came to mind. Did you kind of envision this art installation as sort of deconstructing the documentary form in as like a political statement itself? I was just curious.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think definitely I was interested in a way, like separating it, like you said, because there's in the installation there's 3 screens, but here there's 2. And so the background with these workers, a lot of them come from Jamaica. They work for 8 or 9 months out of the year in Canada, in a farm in Ontario. And I wanted to show that in their existence, they can occupy these 2 spaces simultaneously. So, they're working in one screen in Canada, and the other part, they're in Jamaica, they're at home, they're with their families, they're building their own house, very, with the value that they earned from the labor in Canada. So it's kind of just like, I don't know, this very natural way to depict their reality, both external and internal realities.
Yeah, that's super interesting how they're kind of navigating under the forms of society, really. I think Manuel also had something to add.
Yeah, so since that documentary was a different type of style, were you immediately going for that same vision, or were you a little bit afraid to change your documentary styles from getting different people's perspectives towards now more a singular vision?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to go back and forth to shift back and forth between these different modes of storytelling. And I'm always trying to think of ways to play around, to be playful, I think, with these forms and these languages, because to me, that's just more interesting than trying to excel at this one very accepted language. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's difficult because, again, we are existing. I am working within these structures, right? That on the one hand, like these very extremely capitalistic structures of commercial film, a lot of people say right now we're in this golden age of documentary, or others say a gilded age of documentary, meaning there's more than ever so much money that is being put into documentary. But is it actually furthering the form? Not exactly. I mean, you have the streamers, you have Netflix, you have all these different players coming in, you have people doing documentary series, putting a lot of money into it, but it is still furthering and prioritizing, who are the people who get to tell these stories, who are the people who get to make these films, and who are the people that they are making these films about, right? So I think, in that sense, it's difficult then to kind of plot your own course within that kind of reality. But, to me, it's something worth pursuing.
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned how we are changing the way in which we consume documentary because of the over-the-top, Netflix. But I agree with you. I think that we're just changing the diet, the way in which we consume it, but we're not changing the ingredients and how it's packaged. So I think that what you're doing, it's a very interesting way of packaging in a different way. It's a risky move on your part. Why? Because people might say, what, if it's not familiar to what I do, I'm not used to it, so maybe I'm not going to watch it no matter how good it is. So I think that that's one of the benefits of being independent and being able to be self-funded, to be able to be more playful. I love that you mentioned the word playful, because that's how it starts. I think that some of sorry,
wow, so nice.
I think that one of the very interesting things is how the new technology is evolving. I think that, I don't know, have you experienced with anything with 360 video, VR, immersive environments to even change even further the way in which it's perceived? Have you explored any of the virtual environments?
I actually have not personally created like VR work or, but I do think it's, I mean, I've experienced them at certain festivals and other convenings. It's definitely really fascinating, and it does kind of, it literally puts you into a different mode of digesting or consuming these films and experiences. Personally, I'm not super interested in that as of yet, but I don't know. It's definitely like a realm that is, has a lot of potential. And but again, I think in that space, you have to look at sort of the same things that we're looking at in the traditional spaces of, who is bringing the money to this space, who is commissioning these works, who gets to create these works, and where are they being shown or consumed, right?
I think it's really interesting how you mentioned the part of consumption with these medias. I personally have like a quick experience from probably like 2 weeks ago. I was watching something with my little brother. My little brother wanted to watch this thing on WWE, and it's on Netflix. It says interactive thing. And personally, for me, it was not my cup of tea. It was like trying to be a game and be in a movie at the same time. And I personally didn't enjoy it. So I'll definitely be that kind of audience that would be striving towards familiarity rather than something very radical.
Yeah, and I think, different studios and whatnot have been trying to get that like interactivity, more and more through whatever work they're doing. But I think, a lot of it feels kind of gimmicky to me. And so, so I've seen some VR work that, has been pretty emotional, but then also it's like, what is the goal with that, right? And I think I wanted to talk a little bit about like empathy. A lot of the times people think, the goal of documentaries is to create empathy. But, who are you creating empathy for? Who is your audience in a way that you're trying to create the sympathy in, and to what end? Because I think a lot of times as, again, filmmakers of color, you're asked to almost create like a tour of who you are, of your identity, of your culture, of your community. And then people, get on the tour and then they get off the tour, right? And like, they just go back to the safety of whatever reality they have. Is that really the end goal of what we're trying to do? So, I mean, again, these are a lot of questions. I'm just kind of throwing out a lot of these questions, not really, I don't have, the answer for all of these things. But again, I think it's fascinating to discuss these things, and it's important.
Following up on that, I think, I don't know if you could confirm this, but it's kind of like tackling the question of who is really the loudest voice in the documentary, especially if, like you said, it's a commercial documentary, there's an agenda behind it, there's a company trying to push some sort of view. And would you say that your work is more of starting this conversation around maybe a space that's not the loudest voice?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of divisions, right, within this field, between the commercial work, between the more independent work, and between the more experimental work. So again, for me, for my own personal practice, I want to step between and move through these divides. And I think that's really important to do. Like, as in my bio mentioned, I'm directing an episode of an Apple TV documentary series. And, that very much is a hierarchical space where you have the network, you have the executives who are sort of shaping the product that they're going to be putting onto their platform. But I think at the same time, it's very, it's valuable for people like me, for other creators of color, to be in that space, right? And to challenge certain notions and to be in dialogue with that kind of space. That's the only way, I think that's not the only way, but that's part of the way that realities can change, and we can actually move towards something that feels more equitable, in my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're almost running out of time in here, and we have so many questions. So I don't know, Kevin and Manuel, we have so many questions that we have from the class. So I don't know if you want to choose maybe like one or two more questions out of the big list that we have, and maybe we can always follow up with offline because there's so many questions that we're having here. And we're going to have some questions as well from the YouTube channel. So Manuel, Kevin, any pressing question that you think? I know that some of this we've already talked a little bit about in here. I would like to end, of course, for you to tell us what's upcoming work. But Manuel, Kevin, what do you guys think out of the ones we have over there in the last few minutes we have?
Yeah, definitely. Where do you see yourself more towards the end of your career? Do you see yourself more as being like that, aspiring towards more bigger networking, such as like Apple, or do you see yourself more aspiring towards like independent films?
I think that's a really difficult question, but I think for me, I always aspire to make films that I am passionate about and I am invested in and I'm proud of. So whatever sort of avenue of distribution or sort of creation that lives in, I will be happy with, if that makes sense. I think because I think those things, although it sounds maybe easy or natural, it's actually difficult when you are in this work because it has to sustain right into the future.
Thank you so much.
Following up from that, I guess this question sort of works. How do you find inspiration, or where do you actually go? Do you draw from just your own personal experiences, or do you go on the internet or some other avenue?
Yeah. So, for example, the film Who is Arthur Chu, my co-director, Scott, he actually contacted me about it. And then I read more, because Arthur, he was a writer, so he wrote tons of articles online about nerd culture, about race, misogyny. I read all of that, read more into it and got interested in and fascinated by who he was. And then my other film, A Woman's Work, it's, I actually tutored football at USC where I was going to grad school. And I never really knew about football at all before that because I grew up in Canada and also China. So it's something that, from my lived experience, is something that I wanted to delve further into. But it's also, I love just getting inspired by everything around me. And in a way, I think this is related to being an observer, right? I do enjoy the mode of observing the world around me and using my camera, just wandering around outside. I think there is a lot of value in doing that, whether you're wandering, outside physically in the streets or your community or whatever place, or it's you're browsing, you're wandering on the internet and looking at things and kind of letting things soak in. And the other way I like to generate ideas is to actually take naps, because when I take naps, a lot of these things subconsciously form connections in my mind and ideas will come to me.
Awesome, thank you. And we're really running short on time, so this might be our last question from us. What advice would you give to emerging women filmmakers?
Yeah, I think it's really tough because I think everyone has to find their own way, but I think there's a lot of valuable lessons that you can learn from others that also I have learned from other people. And I think one of the greatest ways to learn is to find your community, right? And I think in 2020, the pandemic and, Black Lives Matter movement, all of these things really inspired me and a lot of other independent filmmakers and artists to find your community and to connect with people, like-minded people, and sort of be in community and be in discussion and share, right? And have this kind of transparency and create this relationship with each other. And I think that's really amazing. I think you will find people to collaborate with, you will find inspiration, you will find a lot of things in in that space. The other thing is I think people will question you, like, undoubtedly throughout your career. Everything you do, every work that you decide to make, people will be questioning you. And I think there is, you have to hold your own, but you also have to be open to thinking outside of the box. And that is different than letting others take you down and sort of letting others direct where you're going. It's being open, but also at the same time knowing who you are and what you want.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Manuel and Kevin, for those thoughtful questions. And I just want to appreciate what you're doing. I think that you're an inspiration. I think that you have the talent of finding really interesting characters. That's one of the things that I notice as a connecting thread. And I think that's one of the best things as a documentary filmmaker, to be able to have the characters and remain that access. Because it looks like you're really passionate. Just the way in which you're talking about your work. This is a work that we do because we believe in what we're doing. And I think that you're very passionate, and I think that this was a very inspirational opportunity to learn more about you. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to give it away to Heather, who is here.
Got a little delay there. Yeah, I'm just going to echo everything that Oscar has just said, but thank you so much, for an incredibly inspiring event. It was so wonderful to learn more about you, to learn more about your films, and most importantly, your unique perspective and dedication as a filmmaker. And thanks to all our co-hosts, Dr. Guerra, Manuel, and Kevin, for holding such a really engaged dialogue. It was just great to be able to listen and watch and hear the conversation. Amazing. To everybody out there, I'll say my last time for the year, because this is our final event for the 2022 series, but do please check out our entire rich lineup from our Diverse Perspectives in Digital Media and Design series from both this year and last year at dmd.uconn.edu/diverse. And if you've missed any of the events, don't worry. Again, you can watch them here on YouTube on this playlist. So subscribe to our channel. And also follow us on social media at UConnDMD to see all of our department's great content. Thanks to everybody in the virtual audience also for joining us today. I hope that all of you are as inspired here as we were during the conversation about the future of documentary in particular. There is a lot of work to be done, but if we continue to inspire and mentor all of our young creators, and I really love that word of advice for young women filmmakers, we especially, we can change this industry for the better. So thank you all. Have a wonderful week, and bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
All right, there we go. Okay.